And so we're going to continue the afternoon with the round table on facility, trust and personalization, 3 key tools for an optimal customer experience. And so here now the leader for this now is Aurélien Bélanger, who's a strategy brand expert in PrestaShop. Just checking you can all hear me. And thank you for joining us today for this roundtable about facility, trust and personalization, 3 key tools for satisfactory customer experience. So what are we talking today? Customer experience. It's something that for me is something that's primary, and for all innovation it was always driven by this notion of customer experience. And today, and for online commerce, these are the most crucial points of conversion and also conquest of new market shares. So how can we translate this? How can we describe this user experience from at the front, from the customer? We're going to have the FAQ. We're going to have the delivery conditions. We're going to have the payment conditions. We're going to have the insurances, all the everything what involves customer service, and put it on a site. That's the front end of the business. And then something which has also become major. This is what you do with the CRM and the data, which has become very important in online commerce and for commerce full stop. And with just talking, commerce full stop, like I said, because the border between online commerce and external commerce is, the border has been broken down over time. And then there's a much more recent notion, which is in everyone's mouth over time. It's the multi-channel and the omni-channel approach, because now you've got so many channels for communication, for the brand and for sale. There's this idea, in fact, that you use an omni-channel approach to optimize the user experience, which is completely seamless and which enables all these notions and make contact with our customers. So we got figures for 2019. So 2019 is a little bit old in the digital business. It's practically the Stone Age. But there's an Accenture interactive study which 64% of customers would be ready to change their site, their brand, their product, if a user experience wasn't sufficiently satisfactory for them, which means that we're something which is quite essential, which also shows that you've got a much more holistic type use now with respect to the users. And what I was saying, you've got the front end, but you've got the back end as well, all the data and everything. But I have the luck to have 2 people with me here who are even more expert on the subject than myself, and I'm able to. So Céline Dibert, who's a partner and manager of Clavio, and Guillaume Panetier, who's the country manager for Trustpilot in France. Today, so for a user, what's the lowest priority or the highest priority to deal in a customer experience? Well, thank you very much for having to host new customers. You have the use of different strategies in order to recover customer data. And you can also think of the checkout as well. And you've seen over the last months as well, you've got the checkout solutions which have been set up with respect to the customer experiences in order to better convert my customers. But today I really wanted to concentrate it onto customer loyalty and after sales service. What do I set up as a brand in order to make my customers more loyal? So there's stuff. So you get in contact with them after you monitor stuff. You follow up afterwards, and you follow up at the site as well with our partners. sort of like you look at all the services like delivery and everything for all these subjects. So the so you've got a future purchase, and what time you start communicating about the brand. What do you want to vehicle? What message do you want to vehicle to your customers? And that's really a major stake for merchants. And today, I'm happy to talk to you about this specific feature with Guillaume. We've a lot of things to say to one another today, and I hope that this is going to be great for you as well. It's great for me to see you. And sort of like for an e-merchant, what's the most essential thing to deal with in the customer experience? I think that it's really important to try to understand feedback. You've got to try to understand, like Celine said, you've got lots of things happening in customer experience. So I'm thinking that the best thing to do is to be sure that you understand what type of experience people have had. And if ever you launch an e-commerce, you've got your first customer experience, so your first sales. And if things went well, why? And if it didn't happen well, why as well? And I think this is the most important thing. Because if you want to offer a very good customer experience, you've got to understand what you're doing wrong at the beginning. It's normal to make mistakes at the beginning. And if you don't know how to make mistakes and learn from them, then of course you're going to be in difficulty then to see you're not going to be able to follow up then afterwards. So I think that this is really the first thing that you've got to do. If you go a little bit more into culture surrounding customer experience and the strategy around customer experience, what is for you what you call, it's another English term again, but how can you develop a customer-centric culture? But I think there's a lot of English expressions in the digital industry, but I think customer-centric it incarnates or embodies one thing. It's a state of mind, in fact, that when you're developing your e-commerce, do you think of yourself, or do you think you're a customer? This is what customer-centric means. And there's a Google philosophy which is known, which is diff, but I'll do it in French. Sort of like things that we know to be true, and the first thing that Google knows that it's true is that you look after the customers, and the rest will follow. So if you've got a new project, if you've got a new city commerce, and you're sort of like restructuring, then do you think about the final users first of all? Like me, for example, sometimes I go onto a site and this is where I start. They've restructured everything, maybe for SEO, and I don't know how the architecture is really done, and sometimes it's not as fluid for me. Sometimes it's not easy for me to understand, and maybe sometimes people restructured, but sometimes sort of like they thought me as a loyal user, I didn't think that I was put in the center of the whole process. They were looking about Google hits more than us. But if you want a customer-centric e-commerce, because that's what's working now, I really think that you've got to, in all the questions that you're asking and all the product tests that you're having, you sort of like say, does this correspond to a customer's need? Is this what the customer wants? That's what I'd say. And I join you on all of these points. I think that what's extremely important is to be customer centric in a holistic way, not just focus on one part specifically, but to see exactly what I'm going to set up at all the different levels and stages of the purchase process or of the customer experience. Is once I contact my customer, what am I going to tell them? When am I going to say it? And this is going to be part of a global strategy with all the tools that you can use, whether it be choosing the right partners. That's another subject as well. But it's really about having a global apprehension of the whole customer pathway and journey. And I think brands have really understood this today. And the brands that are succeeding, they're the brands that adopt this approach from cradle to grave, as it were, from beginning to the end. And this is the cornerstone of the whole brand strategy. And of course, this takes into account the checkout and all the other aspects like we were saying today. But you can take an example like, for example, Apple, from the beginning to the end, we know exactly who they are, we know exactly what they stand for and exactly what they do, and the tone of voice in their stores, etc. So they really do think about the whole global customer experience through the different tools that we use and where we intervene at each stage. Yeah, it is really interesting to to underline not just the usefulness of the product. Of course, there is this mission of the company that's there, and the value, which which can sometimes reassure you. But what's very important to me today in what you were talking about is this multiplicity of different vertical aspects. And when we talk about multiplicity, then we talk about the omni-channel approach again, or the multi-channel approach. This has been the key word which everyone's been using now in the e-commerce branch for the last few years. A lot of people say that from a certain point of view, it's also the future of this sector and the sector of commerce in general, which plays on this vertical. But what about you? How is it possible to provide a consistent customer experience with this multiplication of contact points between a customer and a business and the company that's selling? You know, or a future customer or a potential customer or a current customer. I'm going to start then. We've over the last 18 months during COVID, we've really seen that there's been an acceleration of all these transformations. We've really seen that the customer is going to be in contact much faster with the brand. So how am I going to set up internal strategy to respond to these requirements, whether it be on social media, whether it be on a chat, whether it be on my site? We also talked about opinions with Guillaume. How do I manage to set up strategies in order to make sure that the customer client is optimal, learn, to take away any lessons learned and improve things that are not as good as others? I think that, like we were saying earlier, you've got to look for the right partners. What's the tool that's going to help me? If it's a medium-sized company, how am I going to manage to choose my partners for my company? So you've got to look for a right partner. I think for me, that's the key to success, whether it be concerning delivery, whether it be the opinions, whether it be the marketing, the people who are supporting me in the long term. In order to, I've got to contact my customers at the right time. And of course, like we saw, there are a lot of merchants who have, who are city brands, but now they also have online brands as well. So how do I get into contact with this new population of customers, this new customer segment that didn't exist before, and how do we interact? I think this is really, how am I going to segment all these customers? How do I have access to data? And how do I differentiate between them? And how do I have the right message to talk to each of them? And I think these are really tools which are complementary to one another for the e-merchants, which are going to give them more data about users and create value. Absolutely. And just to come back over what you said, there are going to be more and more channels, there are going to be more and more technical things involved, there are going to be more and more tools. So the stakes involved are technological. So tomorrow, if you launch an e-commerce, but you've got people who operate on a silo basis and who don't communicate between themselves, you've got lots of different individual experiences, but you don't have a brand experience as we understand it. So the technical aspect, we see this with our customers. Our customers are very often new, and what you ask us is that between ourselves that we share more data and that our tools are easier for each other to use. Is that you want it to be easy, like PrestaShop, or to put an opinion on Trustpilot, and then afterwards then to be able to insert it in a campaign on Klaviyo. It's going to be really easy to click from one campaign in Klaviyo to an order on PrestaShop, and I don't know, potentially tickets in a support center. And at the end of this global experience, then they ask Trustpilot. And if we don't have the right if we haven't had the right approach, and if we haven't got all if we haven't got everything lined up properly, and like lots, and this is true for administration as well. You've got to go to this place, you've got to go to that place. It's like a public services before you get sent from Billy to Jack, as it were. You've got to have the right technical teams to make sure that you don't get sent around all the houses when you've got a problem. And I'm just going to come back to what you said earlier as well. And the knowledge of users is really essential as well for the customer experience. If you've got somebody who comes onto your site and they leave an opinion, three out of five, am I going to send them? Am I going to send them marketing things that propose an experience that they're not ready to have? Maybe not. So you've got to have the right partners as well in order to contact them at the right time in the future, but also on the other side as well. The customers who like the solution, how am I going to treat these in the future? How am I going to interact with them? And if somebody who's if I've if somebody leaves an opinion which is 5 out of 5, how do you treat them differently in the future? New products, for example, or treat them as a VIP to communicate with them first of all on a priority basis. And I think there are tools which can really analyze the data and which enable us to extrapolate it and to have groups of customers who interact with my site and my company in a certain way. Thank you. And if you take finally, if I take your respective experience in your field, Guillaume, maybe this is more for this idea of user or the customer, and for you, Celine, the subject of marketing automation and personalization of services. Are there really points with respect to your respective expertise? Is there something you're paying particular attention to today? If yeah, there are two major ones. Just to take, if we're talking about the customer feedback, I think the first one, we keep repeating it because it's the most important. It's data. And it's data that can be quantitative. If you're an e-commerce that has hundreds or tens of thousands of customers every month, you've got to be able to treat this in a quantitative manner, and you've got to have easy analysis of all of this. And you've got to have a quality approach as well, that you can't just hope that you get 10,000 opinions and a score, say 4, and satisfy yourself, be content with the data. You've got to understand why you had 4. What are you doing? What are you doing today that can be really improved? What are you doing that's damaging the experience? What are your strongest points? What are your weakest points? Like Lavia, if everybody's happy with our customer service, then we can segment it, and then we can have a campaign which is based on the opinions we're getting. So the essential thing is data. We were talking about the back end earlier. You need to make sure that it's in the back office. If it's going to be easy for the customer in the back office, you've got to make sure that you understand what the trends are and what in your customer experiences. There's also going to be another major point, which is a little bit more to the front end. You were mentioning at the beginning, sort of like reassurance at the front, and there's also this element as well, because when you've collected lots of data, when you've learned how to know your company, then of course then you can quite simply export this data in your acquisition chain so that people are trusted, because it's going to be extremely hard to have a good experience if you don't trust, if you don't feel confident during the experience. It's not nice to have an experience where you're a bit worried, where you're a bit apprehensive. So you've got to have a user pathway or a journey when they feel completely secure from A to Z. They've got to trust the whole thing. There's got to be trust at the back end and the front end. I absolutely agree with you. I think today the key word here is data, and how am I going to access all the information on my customers in order to be able to talk to them and to offer them a user experience which is the right and the appropriate levels. So the integrations for us is absolutely essential. We integrate all the data along the whole process in order to be sure that the user experience is at the highest level possible. So I think that all the points that I said earlier are valid as well for this question. This is really you've got to know your customer, and to be able to offer a unique personalized experience with respect to what they were buying before. So it could be a new collection which is on a site that they're used to visiting. It could also be sort of like the whole the shopping basket or the shopping trolley experience, to make sure that this is easier, and to focus as well on the picking the right partners. And this makes me think as well of what we were saying earlier. I was talking with a customer who's called Nookies, who's a small country, and want they wanted to go from a small family-sized business to something which was scaled up. And in terms of data, I think it's important for you to understand the case study here. The feedback was segmented by delivery service providers, and they had a company that was selling to young mothers, and they wanted it to be the calmest, best, most pleasant experience possible. So you just had to make sure people felt safe and secure, and they got feedback, and that everything was better with certain deliverers than with other delivery providers. So that I said, okay, we're only going to work with this delivery provider from now. And that's for a delivery provider, but they also had feedback from things that they were doing and which was capable of improvement. Like some young mothers were saying to them that this, sort of like, but this little toy here looks much bigger on the photograph. So they redesigned all the packaging and all the pictures concerning this, so that people weren't disappointed. Because if you think you're going to get a teddy bear that's really big and then finally it's tiny, then it's not a pleasant customer experience. Yep. Well, thank you very much for all these explanations and insights. So now the topic of this PrestaShop day is to talk about the future of commerce. And so my last question for you is, what's the future of customer experience or user experience? Who's going to start? Okay, I'll start then. I think we talked about all the solutions that are available today with merchants, whether it be delivery, the checkout, all the payment solutions which are there on the market. Of course, you can think about an experience which is very connected or hyper connected, ultra connected, where there could be solutions that are integrated into different tools and that can provide a customer experience which is completely 360-degree. We talked about data, and this is going to be a key issue in the future in order to access all these levers to provide an optimal customer experience. So there's a lot of things coming in the future. It's very difficult to forecast because things are really accelerating. It goes really fast. So you've got to be adaptable. You've got to do it fast. You've got to do it with the right partners. That's the key. And when you're talking about the future, I have 45 ideas, so I don't know how I'm going to go through all of them and forecast which of the ideas are the best. But I think the future, you can try guess what's coming. More and more there are technologies that exist today which aren't used. And what's happening is we've got a generation, the internet generation, which is younger and younger and older as well. So, for example, we said, sort of like the youngsters today are born with a telephone in their hands, so they know how to use all these applications than I do. So there's these new generations that come, and they've got like acquisition channels, and they've got their own ways of doing things. They've got their own experience requirements, which are special to them. And then you've got our generation, which is getting a little bit older, which is going to remain within their old trusted channels. And you've got to be able to propose customer experiences which are completely different from the other generation. I still go to real shops. I still go to the real shops, but I won't be surprised if my grandchildren, they go through shops with a virtual reality helmet. And this is why we've got to be ready for everything that's coming. There are huge technological changes which are coming, and sort of like, if you miss the train with you can be on the second plan today, or you can be a company who was on the center stage before, they can just lose the stage completely. So the future customer experience will be the omni-channel approach and the hyper personalized experience, because we're all going to be entities and people which are more and more segmented, and you've got to be capable of offering each user the experience that they are expecting and that they want. That seems perfect. Seems to be the perfect word at the end. Are there questions in the room, Doc? Because we cannot see anything from here. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Question. I can't hear the person asking the question doesn't seem to have a microphone. What are your criteria? What are your criteria for working with merchants? And how do you manage to, what are your criteria for working with these people? Sorry, there's no microphone, and there's no microphone in the hall. So how do you evaluate the different merchants that you work with? And what size do they have to be? Okay, good question. I think that from our side, I'm talking for Klaviyo, we don't have. We offer premium, so we support merchants when they're growing. So it could be somebody who starts. We love saying that we can open a shop and sort of like do the campaign in the afternoon and sort of like manage the turnover requirements for the afternoon. So we talked about, but we deal with everybody. I don't think that there's a bad profile or a bad starting point. In Klaviyo, we can support all types of and all sizes of companies, and of course our targets are medium-sized. We've got a lot of companies as well who use our tool, and they've got nothing set up yet. So we really have to make sure that they set things up really, really quickly so that they can acquire as many clients as possible and to generate as much turnover as possible. And I think that there are a lot of tools today which are accessible, whether it be, and once again, client monitoring, client follow-up, and delivery. So you've got to start somewhere. And I think that we can set things up really simply and quickly, which can have a significant impact with the e-commerce merchants. I hope that I've answered your question. I would say exactly the same thing. We also have a premium model with Transpilot, and we want to be able to support everybody. We work with micro companies or people who do something else a completely different job in the day and then have their internet site for the evening. So we also deal with very small companies. So we work with every size. Of course, that the requirements of a multinational are different. It's not going to be in the free pack, of course. But what we hope that we've done well is that we can identify criteria and needs, and we can work with them according to them. We don't think it's according to the size. We think it's according to the needs. When you open a business, then you're going to be using a whole variety of tools. And if you ask me, everybody should use Trustpilot, of course, but you've got lots of priorities. So you understand, of course, that sometimes sort of like a paying tools, Trustpilot is good for you, but it's not the right timing with respect to your turnover or with respect to your order book. Maybe you don't have enough. Maybe you don't have enough employees. Maybe you've got other things to manage, like logistics, etc. So there's premium. If you've got PrestaShop today and you want to use Trustpilot, there are free applications which enable you to use the two together. And as soon as you have the next orders with PrestaShop, then you can have a Trustpilot page. So I hope I've answered the question as well. I hope I haven't made it too complex by talking about it too much, but really we support any size and any size of timing and any size and whatever the priority of that company. We support everyone. Does that answer the question? Are there other questions? Then in that case, then I think let's wrap it up. So thank you very much to both of you, Celine and Guillaume. It was a pleasure to have you here today, and wish you all the best for this future customer experience in your respective fields. Thank you very much.